world found out that Albus Dumbledore was gay in 2007. Now, this was the same year that the Deathly Hallows book was released, but we didn't find out about it explicitly in the text itself. Instead, J.K. Rowling outed him in an interview. When it was first announced that Fantastic Beasts was going to deal with these characters, J.K. Rowling had this to say: "As far as Dumbledore's sexuality is concerned, watch this space." This was taken by a lot of people as a sort of tongue-in-cheek encouragement. However, just this week, the director of the film has said that, at least in the next film, Dumbledore will not be explicitly gay. And people are, to put it mildly, pretty annoyed about this. But why, you special snowflakes? It's just a kids' film. This is just one example of a trend which is much, much larger. And we're going to talk about it today. So in the UK, I think we have this idea that the practice of banning children's books in schools and libraries, especially for things like religious reasons or moral reasons, is kind of like a US-centric thing, but that is very much not the case. In the UK in 1986, there was a massive tabloid backlash, a campaign against a book called Jenny Lives with Eric and Martin. This book, which showed a girl with two fathers, was seen as something that children needed to be protected from. And it actually led in 1988 to Section 28. It was a clause in a local authority act, and it said this: "You shall not intentionally promote homosexuality or publish material with the intention of promoting homosexuality, or promote the teaching of any maintained school of the acceptability of homosexuality as a pretended family relationship." And this was a clause which had a devastating effect in practice. The National Union of Teachers released a statement which included, "The effect of Section 28, therefore, is to inhibit anti-discrimination initiatives and make it difficult for schools to prevent or address the serious problems that arise from homophobic bullying." Many people saw it as a government sanctioning of homophobia. So this clause came into effect in 1988. Way before J.K. Rowling published the first Harry Potter book. But it was only repealed in 2003 when Order of the Phoenix was released. And even after that, where I grew up, the council there made its own version of Section 28 to replace it once it had been officially repealed on a national level. And Deathly Hallows and the outing of Dumbledore came only 4 years later when I was 15. And even 3 years after that, I was still very much feeling the effects in school of Section 28's legacy. I was told that we weren't allowed any teachers who were openly supportive of gay students because it could lead to inappropriate relationships. We weren't allowed to access any helplines or support sites on the school computers. They were blocked explicitly on the screen, it said, for lesbian and gay content. This idea of it being inappropriate for gay people to be around children, which is not even to go into the discussion of the amount of children who are gay themselves, is something with a long history. We can see it in America with Anita Bryant in the Save Our Children campaign, which talked about the idea that gay people shouldn't be allowed to be teachers at all because they might be predatory or converting children. Even now, all you have to do is look at the comments on any video that I or other people have made suggesting that we should have gay characters in kids media to show that there are a lot of people who don't consider themselves homophobic, who consider themselves kind of reasonably open-minded, who draw the line at the idea of children seeing gay relationships. As we look at Rowling's statements about Dumbledore that she's made in the past, there is even that tension for her between acknowledging a gay character for a more adult audience that she's writing for by the time she gets to the end of the series, and for the 9-year-old who would be reading The Philosopher's Stone at the beginning. She describes someone who might pick up on the hints of Dumbledore and Grindelwald in the text of Deathly Hallows as being a more worldly reader, but she also acknowledges that she's left it ambiguous, that a 9-year-old could read it and think he just made a great friend. Now, I say all this to acknowledge how big a deal it is that you have an openly gay character who's also a pretty badass teacher, who is complicated and morally grey, who has a very intense and complicated relationship with another man, whatever that might turn out to be. But I also say it to acknowledge how difficult it was back then to have a gay character in a mainstream children's piece of media at all. And to acknowledge how actually nowadays things aren't much better. We still don't really see gay characters in children's TV or films, and if it is there, it's very chaste. It doesn't get treated with the same amount of affection as a straight couple might be. But I think that this could have been a massive step forward, and it looked like it would be, but that opportunity hasn't been taken. Harry Potter was a milestone for a lot of young people my age, particularly people who now consider themselves socially aware activists. In 2014, there was a study which talked about the idea that people who had read Harry Potter had higher levels of empathy for marginalised groups, for example. I think another reason why people are quite frustrated with this is that we have the character of Grindelwald within the first Fantastic Beasts film, and there's a lot of queer coding within his relationship with Credence. There's this sort of pseudo-queer, very creepy and manipulative and predatory homosexual kind of toned relationship between them. Add to that the fact that Credence himself is a very thinly veiled metaphor for a lot of people for the idea of the gay experience of being closeted, and that the kind of pressures and anxieties that can lead to. The idea that hiding who you truly are can ultimately be the most destructive thing you can do. We've been seeing for a while this trend of queer baiting in media, and I've done a video all about that if you want to check that out, and I'll leave it in a link below. Even more recently, we've kind of had a next step in this. The idea of outing characters away from the screen, away from the text itself, in a version of what Rowling did with Dumbledore way back in 2007. They want to get the credit for representation without actually having it. To have a gay character who turns evil from being metaphorically closeted, and then another potentially gay character who's just a predatory man who preys on boys, and then to not have an explicit representation of an actually canonically gay character who is a sort of grey area hero, strikes a lot of people as being kind of messed up. I want to, in my heart of hearts, say that they just didn't realise how important this was going to be to people, but I imagine that it's probably going to err more on the side of not wanting to upset more conservative audiences, both kind of domestic and international. I really hope that, considering there are meant to be 5 films in this series for some reason, that the last 3 will actually explore this in some depth. And I'm also hoping that in doing that, we open the floodgates for that kind of representation on all levels for all age groups in a way that is reflective of our reality that we live in. So what do you think? I'd love to hear your comments below. If you'd like to help support me make these videos, then I'll leave a link to my Patreon along with all of my social media so you can find me all over the internet. And until I see you next time, bye.